Welcome back from the Centre for Teams to our series of webinars entitled Adapt, aimed at providing you with some practical guidance and insight at a time of great change. My name is Chris Sheepshanks, and I'm joined by my colleague David Webster. Both of us have been supporting leaders, teams, and organisations for the last 20 years. Over the last 10 weeks, we have all seen evidence of both collaboration and competition within systems and also potentially at a more ground level within our own teams and indeed our families. This webinar aims to reinforce your understanding of the benefits of teams, the joy and the pain of them, and to be a call for action for team leaders and team members alike to reap the benefits of effective teamship and to stop enduring the pain of its absence. David, how can you build on that?
Well, it's very interesting looking around us now, seeing the amount of collaborative effort that's being put into organisations and indeed whole societies at this time. And I think we've seen the best and the worst. On the best side, of course, we've had communities clubbing together to support those who are vulnerable. We've seen 250,000 people report to support the NHS at this time out in their communities. We've had the track and trace volunteers, 30,000 of them. And we've seen the Nightingale hospitals set up in record time. So that's the best really of collaborative effort. We've also seen the worst, where nations have competed for medical supplies and kit. And although you could say, well, the world's economy is not set up for social purpose, the chances are actually that is not very good collaboration. It's good evidence that we need to work harder at making sure that we can understand how we can collaborate better. And throughout history, in fact, throughout evolutionary history, we've needed to work together to achieve things that are difficult. And that sense of interdependence of task is an important thing to bear in mind. Whole civilizations have been built, societies, nations have been built through collaborative effort. Very difficult to think of any one person who's done one thing that has completely changed the world without being a member of a team or having collaborated with others. You think of Nobel Prize winners, and you said the other day that Michelangelo didn't paint the entire ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He had a team of people doing it. So that's worth bearing in mind. No man is an island entire unto himself, John Donne. So this idea that collaboration is important is not a new one. And here at the Centre for Teams, we're very used to dealing with these kind of situations, supporting leadership teams and project teams working in high stakes environments where they're trying to do difficult things together. They're trying to achieve enormous ambition, either for growth or for retraction. They're trying to collaborate across national and international boundaries and between different parts of the organization. They're trying to trigger change in response to challenge from outside. So these are big things. And of course, they have big budgets as well. So big responsibilities go along with that. And in these kinds of high stakes environments, easy to accept that there is both the joy and the pain of collaborative effort. But of course, it doesn't have to be painful, and you don't have to endure suboptimal performance. You can go for gold. You can reap the benefits of a truly effective team. And the kind of the joy and the pain is really what we're here to talk about today. So Chris, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about that from personal experience.
David, thank you. And I think just building on that, the idea of collaboration and competition are important for us. And yet at a ground-based level, that's not why we gravitate towards one grouping or another. We do it because actually we enjoy it. We enjoy being with that group or that team, or actually we find it difficult. And the challenge in an organizational setting is sometimes we don't always feel we have a choice. Because there is, and hopefully everyone has experienced this at some stage, a huge joy of being a part of a team that actually is very purposeful, where it's actually clear on what it's there to achieve, where people sit around the room and they know why they're here, because actually we're clear on the collective endeavor, the objectives we want to create, whether that's for customers or staff or wider stakeholders. Well, you can see it in the moment, actually, when you meet, even in a virtual environment, when a team comes online and they enjoy each other's company. There's immediate warmth and humor. There's a creation of energy. There's often a high level of trust that actually allows me to offer support, and which also allows me to offer challenge that actually leads to a better decision. And it's a place actually where we often learn together, where we actually also apply that learning, we adapt. And through that, actually, that becomes a binding force in its own right, because we are growing and developing with each other. And often that's the place that we gravitate towards, because actually it's where we can really show ourselves, show our discretionary efforts, feel we belong, play our part. And too often, when we think about our experience, and perhaps what you've experienced over the last 10 weeks, there are teams that actually are not like that. They're the other end of the spectrum. They're painful, hard work. We sort of slightly drag ourselves to the meeting and then sort of experience everyone else has dragged themselves there too. There's quite a lot of dark humor as a result. There's often a place where actually there's a distinct lack of purpose. We don't really know why we're all here. Why? There's a sense of almost, I'm wasting my time. And actually I could do this quicker and faster if I just did it by myself. There are elephants in the room. There are things we can't talk about. There are places I can't actually feel that I can speak up because I'm concerned about the consequences. And as a result of all that, effort declines and tension increases and results fall, even if we try to portray a nice picture for our boss or for our stakeholders. And that's the place that we want and invite people to say, it doesn't have to be the latter. You can create the former. And there's actually quite a lot of evidence, both from research and psychological research, that actually tells us that actually there is a better way of operating. David, can you pick up on that?
Yeah, it's I think what you've just described are kind of polar opposites, but it is a spectrum, of course. And often we meet teams that are languishing in the middle between. There's some moments that are joyful and some moments that are less joyful and quite painful. What's useful to bear in mind is that kind of resignation of kind of saying, well, we'll just kind of have to put up with this kind of stuff, means that the opportunity for real performance that's sustainable is eroded. So you don't accrue the benefits. I'll talk about the benefits in a second. But of course, all of those teams that we work with are trying to do, as we've said, difficult things in high stakes environments. So the chances are there are always opportunities to improve performance and improve the psychological makeup of the team in order that it can improve its own performance over time. It's worth bearing that in mind. Often the difference between the joy and the pain can be rooted in the psychological phenomenon called social loafing and social laboring, where social loafing is the phenomenon where an individual's effort might decline as a function of being part of a team. And social laboring is where it increases. So you get the effect from social laboring of 1 + 1 + 1 = 4 or 5 or 6, rather than the kind of dismal 1.5 that often leaders are resigned to. But there is real benefit. It's not guaranteed though. Somebody called Richard Hackman, who was a big noise in research for teams towards the end of his life in particular, in his book, Teams That Work and Teams That Don't, concluded that high performance teams are not the norm. They are much more rare than we would have them be, but there are some simple things that if you get right, you can have a big impact and you can reap the benefits. But it's worth talking for a moment about the kind of benefits that are available if you get it right. And I'm just going to do a quick excursion into the research that tells us that. You can get you can get performance benefit directly as a result of increases in productivity, a reduction in employee turnover. And these are quite well-researched phenomena if you get it right. In addition, you can have a high degree of motivation that people experience in teams as a function, for instance, of something called goal-setting theory, where if you set simple, challenging goals that are compelling for the team to work work towards, then it has a motivational impact. There's a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And that was from Locke and Lason's early work in the 1970s. In addition, there are huge psychological and socio-emotional benefits from being part of a team that are not to be underestimated. So Baumeister's research on the sense of belonging that you get from being part of a team is worth bearing in mind. Also, other researchers have noted that there is an increase in well-being, an increase in positive affect if you get it right in a team. So positive emotion and positive attitudes, all very important. Also useful to bear in mind that the more you can build belief and commitment in a team, the more successful that team will be. So there is a connection between how people think and feel and the effect in performance terms. Also useful to bear in mind some of the bridges, what in the research language are called moderators. Then they don't win you the game, but if you don't have them, they'll lose you the game. Things like trust and psychological safety. So the safer I feel, the more I will be able to speak up. And that's research on psychological safety from somebody called Amy Edmondson in North America. And trust, of course, as we all know, is a very important element in particularly in teams that are trying to do something difficult together, because they need to exchange help and support and useful challenge in making sure that they can work together effectively. So those are some of the elements of research that go to make up the case for good and effective teamship. We'll talk in the next webinar about how you reach those things, how you can construct that kind of environment and reap those kinds of rewards. But again, worth bearing in mind that it's not a guarantee. You do need to do some simple things really well. And of course, it's incumbent upon senior leaders to lead the charge on that. But you've got some thoughts about what might stop those senior leaders from saying, actually, we need to do something about this.
David, thank you. Yes, I think there is some interferences, some things which get in the way. And I think our own observation is that many teams actually just muddle along, perhaps because they feel they have to. Teamship can be left to chance or to the rather ambivalent belief that we can just throw 8 very talented people in the room and they will immediately work well together and form a team. And that can be okay as a strategy until actually things are challenged or you face a crisis. And our experience is things then unravel. And many of the things that we've expressed in this brief webinar, we believe at some level you already know. You probably already know the importance of goals and trust. But for some reason, we don't always do something about it. And for some, that's simply because actually I don't know where to start. For others, it's actually the fact that actually we are moving so fast as a team. The demands are so great. The pressure is so high. The pressure to create results is so enormous that actually it feels indulgent to pause and stop, even if I think it is valuable to think actually about how we work well together. And then there can be the slightly sort of darker side of that, which is actually, I feel quite vulnerable raising this issue, because actually there is perhaps a power dynamic in the team or a hierarchy. I'm not quite secure about my ability to speak up and voice that I'm finding this really difficult. Or there are some elephants in the room that actually we just don't want to talk about because we fear if we do, everything might unravel. And we actually just don't believe it has to be like that. Our experience is all of those challenges can be addressed, but it does require each of us, whether you're a leader or a team member, to have the courage to stand up and say, and actually to be sure and believe in themselves enough that their contribution and their time is valuable and shouldn't be wasted in a team environment that is dismal, that is draining. The last 10 weeks will have undoubtedly shown you a little more of the sort of team that you are working in. Its great strengths and potentially some of its pinch points. We'd invite you to stay curious about what that's telling you and where you may need to focus. In the next webinar, we are going to explore with a little more detail what makes a high-performing, or what we describe as an adaptable team. Thank you very much for listening. From David and from I, and we look forward to seeing you again for for the next webinar.